My name is Jim Walker. I'm a member of the board of directors of the Cupertino Historical Society and Museum. And we're here today on Tuesday, July 20th, 2004 to interview Ron Cali. And I'll let Ron do a little bit more of his own personal introduction. Ron, why don't you fill us in?
My name is Ron Cali. I am 53 years old. I was born in San Jose actually, but have lived most of my life, lived or worked in Cupertino. Currently live in Saratoga, but I grew up on Bub Road in Cupertino and still kind of refer to it as home.
Ron, you have a famous name. Tell us a little bit about your parents.
My dad, Ed Cali, was born in Willits, California in 1916. My grandparents were there, had moved there from San Francisco actually. They were Sicilian immigrants and had a son who was very sickly at the time, so the doctors advised moving to the country, get out of the city. So they moved to Willits where the baby passed away, and then my dad was born shortly thereafter. They did some, I believe, grape farming up there, and the phylloxera root louse came and wiped them out, so they came down here into the Campbell area and then eventually made their way to Cupertino. So that's Dad's side. My mom was born in Sunnyvale, and they met at Fremont High School and were married in 1940. Had my two twin sisters in 1943 and myself in 1950.
Mm-hmm. Tell us where you grew up.
I grew up on Bub Road in Cupertino. My grandparents and parents had a prune and apricot ranch up there, about 100 acres, which was directly adjacent to Kennedy School right now, and then the Ward Crump housing development on Terrace Drive. So our property bordered that area. We also had another ranch on the other side of Bub Road that we referred to as the Chuck Ranch. We bought from the Chuck family. It's where Pumpkin Drive and I think some of those other streets are in there off of Bub Road. So yeah, I grew up, lived there from the time I was 1 year old until I was 21.
That part is West Cupertino. When did that start to change away from the agricultural basis that you remember?
Right. I'd say the beginning 60s to mid 60s is when we started to see some more development in there. Prices for fruit were very low. People couldn't make their payments. Besides the fact there was no Williamson Act, which meant that properties kept getting reevaluated by the county based on what was going on around you, not the fact that you were a farmer. So that had a lot to do with us and the rest of the farmers getting out of the business here. So I'd say it was around the mid 60s.
What did you do when you were a kid growing up?
Well, walked to Grandma's house with a .22, shooting little birds for her to put in the sauce. She was a great cook, and anything that anything that walked or crawled or flew went into Grandma's sauce. So the best gift I could bring her was a sack full of Dove or something like that she would immediately prepare and put into a polenta sauce or a ravioli sauce or something like that. So there was that. There weren't a lot of kids that you might imagine. There were two streets down below us, Bay and Columbus, and there were some kids down there, but I didn't really get to know them until I got into kindergarten. I went to Lincoln School for kindergarten and then to St. Joseph's for the rest of my education. So mostly it was my dogs and myself and kind of, amusing yourself.
You said you went to Lincoln School on...
Mm-hmm.
Lincoln School was there where the current Lincoln School
Correct.
is.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
That's right.
And there was no, of course, Kennedy School at that time.
Right. There was, and no Monte Vista High, of course.
Okay. Give us some memories of your parents and your growing up with them.
Well, Dad, as I had indicated to you earlier, but the folks don't know that, is still alive. My mom passed away in 1997. Dad was busy most of the time between our milling business, the trucking business, and then we had several different ranches that he also oversaw, so he was a pretty busy character. And my mother was a homemaker, as was popular in the 50s. Didn't work outside the home, but took care of my sisters and myself, and that was kind of what she did.
What do you remember most about your parents?
Oh, good or bad? My dad had a famous temper, and not that he was unkind, but he would, you know, you didn't want to cross Dad, especially if he'd had a bad day at work. And Mom was always the one you kind of went to and, you know, would soothe the feathers, so to speak.
Okay. Tell us about the house you grew up in. Was it a big house, a
It
farmhouse?
was a fairly good-sized ranch-style home. They had it built on a piece of the prune orchard between 1950 and 1951. Was all made out of redwood siding. They added onto it eventually, put in a larger master bedroom and a larger living room. But it was a fairly good-sized house. I'm thinking through a kid's eyes, trying to estimate the size of it. I'd say it was probably around 5,000 to 6,000 square feet. Mm-hmm. Construction costs were a lot less back then.
Well, a big house. Did it have a barn and a workshop and
No,
some stuff? You said it was in an orchard.
It was, but it wasn't a ranch house by any means. It was a California ranch-style home. Had a detached garage. There was a tennis court in back. I remember that my dad built or had built for my sisters. They were tennis players. And then a couple of little storage areas for a small tractor and things like that. Dog run, fenced-in dog run.
You said you were born in 1950?
Mm-hmm, correct.
And Cupertino was established in 1955. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us what your recollection of Cupertino was in that time, during that time?
Well, that goes from, you're asking me to remember what I remembered at 5 years old.
Well, I'll let you go up till 10 or 12.
Right. I remember, De Anza Boulevard being very small. It was called Highway 9 back then, which we still sometimes refer to it. The main downtown was the little row of shops where you might remember Cicero's Pizza used to be. That was, start with where Armadillo Willie's is now. That was the first bank in Cupertino. It was the Cupertino National Bank, which later became Barclays and several other things. Then there was the first shop was the post office. Then there was the drugstore. I think there was a small jeweler, doctor and dentist, Angie's department store. There was a real estate office, Don Banley's real estate office.
Now, all this was on Stevens Creek Run?
No, this was on De Anza.
Okay, this is all on De Anza.
Right.
Okay.
Where did I leave off? The real estate office, Cupertino Bakery. And the last shop, what I remember, was the Cupertino Variety Store. That later became Cicero's Pizza. That was basically the downtown.
And that extended from what streets to what streets now?
If you use Armadillo Willie's as a landmark, there was that small little street that's right beside it right now. We referred to that as Cali Alley because it was called Cali Avenue. At one time, it went through our property, and there was a subdivision map that was filed years ago. So it extends from where that little street is now down to the corner of Stevens Creek and De Anza.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about your school days. Go back to Lincoln School. How big was the school? What are your recollections of that school? It was still on the same site as it is today?
Yeah. That was kindergarten. I don't remember all that much about it. I remember a couple of the kids. Kenny Gilson, his dad was a butcher at Raffretti's, Johnny Boitano's butcher shop in Raffretti's Market. We later both went to St. Joseph's together, so he became a good friend. I remember the principal was Mildred Bertner, and my teacher's name was Mrs. Barshinger. Don't ask me where I got that, but but that's really all I remember. I don't remember too much. I remember riding the bus. They had a bus that would take us. I'd have to be down at the end of my driveway on Bub Road, and they'd bus us over. And it was half-day kindergarten. I remember the sour milk and the stale graham crackers, or at least it seemed sour at the time. That's really about all I can remember.
Was there a schoolyard, or did you go home and play, or were there sports?
There was a schoolyard. Well, kindergarten, you pretty much went home when they marshaled you in the bus, and then I remember playing around, playing at home when I was about that age.
Tell us a little bit about St. Joseph's School during that time.
St. Joseph's had just opened. It opened with 3 grades, first, second, and third grade. That would have been 1956. And I started the first grade class. So I wasn't the first graduating class, but I was the first to go through all the way from first to eighth grade. They now have a kindergarten. But
And that's still at the same place there on the, would be the east side of
That's right.
Deanza, north of Stevens Creek.
Yes, that's right. And they've enlarged their complex quite a bit from my days there. Like I said, we started with 3 classrooms and we had 1 wing. And they, over the summer, they built the 2nd wing when they got ready to have the 6th graders come in. So, and as I say, it's gone on and on. I still, there's some friends that I have to this day that I met back there. The Pelosi family, I'm sure you know
sure.
Tony Pelosi and his daughter Diane and I were
Former
in the same
mayor.
class. That's right.
Right.
Yep. I see him at church every Saturday almost, he and his wife,
Right.
Aileen. So there are some people that I still, keep in contact with that I met there.
Did St. Joseph's look similar? I know that in the last year, they've just added a new
We put a new building up.
building up front, but
right.
in the back, did it look pretty much the same, the school?
Well, the church itself was built, I believe, this current church that we see in 1953. The school was built in, well, as I said, 55, 56. So the 1 wing that was the original wing is still there. That's being used as kindergarten and first, second, third, and 4th grades, I think, and I think they have a computer lab in the last part of it. Then they built the wing across the mall from it, and that was for the office and it's actually 6th, 7th, and 8th grades. Then they decided that they needed a double school in the 70s, and then as enrollment fell off in the, I guess it was late 70s, early 80s, they started using those rooms for other purposes, and it's a single school right now. They have 35 kids in each class. Excuse me.
Tell me, again, I didn't attend a parochial or Catholic school. Were you taught by nuns or
Oh,
were you
yeah.
taught by teachers in everyday dress?
We had, my teacher was a 21-year-old nun, and she had 51 kids. And we all said, yes, ma'am. We opened with a staff, the school opened with a staff of 3, the principal, who also taught 3rd grade, a lay teacher who taught 2nd grade, the nun that I had that taught 1st grade, and a janitor. And that was the entire complement for somewhere around the neighborhood of 155 kids.
Now that school, St. Joseph's, was about 2.5 miles from your house? Something
About
like
3 miles, yeah.
3 miles. How did you get to school?
My mother would drive me, and then later on, my dad would bring me in as I got older, and I went in a little bit earlier.
Now that school is only a block from Cali and Brother Mill.
Just across the street.
So it was, did your dad drop you in on his way to work? Or
Yeah.
did he come back? Sounds like he must have gone to work early.
He did. He went to work early, and he would drop me off, and then in those days, you probably remember, you could drive across Stevens Creek Boulevard from the church into our driveway at Cali Brothers. Can't do that anymore.
Tell me a little bit about you after you graduated from St. Joseph's, then where did you go?
Went to Bellarmine College Prep in San Jose, and then from there, University of Santa Clara. Studied business and accounting there, and then as soon as I graduated, put on the feed bag and went to work at the mill.
So have you always worked at the mill? And of course now you have an independent financial management business?
Correct, yeah. Yes, I did. I worked at the mill from the time I was a kid, after school and weekends and summers, of course. And then when I graduated college, I started working there full time, doing some accounting work, kind of overseeing our feed store. And then in the summertime, everybody switched hats because that was the busy time of year for our trucking business. The trucking business concentrated on hauling the produce from the orchards into the canneries. So it all comes ripe at once, and so you have to, just put in long hours and try to make things work.
Sounds great. Did you ever plan on doing anything else besides working in the business, or was it sort of preordained that that's where you were going to be?
I thought I would want to teach at one time, and thought about it quite a bit. And I thought, well, we'll try this, and if it doesn't work, maybe I could always, go back and get a teaching credential, because if you have a college degree, that's always a big help. So, but I enjoyed working with the family, and my dad was, getting up in years, and there wasn't really anybody else that was interested in kind of keeping it going. So I did that until '84 when times changed and we ended up finally selling the property and
So
shut the
most,
business down.
excuse me,
Sure.
Robert. Most of your jobs then were working in the mill or around maybe the farm, or?
When I was younger, they kind of put me everywhere. I actually worked in the mill mixing feed, sacking feed. I worked in our truck repair shop learning diesel mechanic things like that. As I got a little bit older, in the store also. I used to work a lot in the store, waiting on customers, sacking up small bags of feed, sweeping, things like that. As I got older and got a little more business education, then they put me in the office and sort of brought me in on some of the accounting end of things and then the management end of things.
Were you aware of Cupertino's changing demographics and the way it advanced both in its business and its social life and makeup? Were you aware of that, or were things just going on like for most of us, you were just living day to day? And
yeah, pretty much during that time. Of course, in the late '70s, early '80s, we saw quite an influx of Asian population here, and that was fairly evident as things changed. Of course, we being my family was part of a great migration too when the Italians and the Yugoslavians came in here, because before that there was mostly, I think, English and Irish people. So goes around comes around. Everybody's an immigrant, I guess.
We are, most of us.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about Cali and Brothers Mill. Give us a little background on that, and then I'll ask you some specific questions.
Sure. Well, the property was acquired by my grandfather and his brother in 1926 to be used as a truck yard, because they started this little trucking business and it was growing, and they kept the trucks up at the home ranch up on Bub Road. And my grandmother got tired of having the drivers come in at 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning and starting these trucks up and waking everybody up, and it just wasn't a place to have diesel trucks. So they acquired, I think it was 9 acres at that time, and then eventually added to it at the corner of Stevens Creek and De Anza. And as I say, the purpose for it was a truck yard. Then in the, I guess it was early to mid 30s, they opened up their feed and fuel warehouse, and in direct competition to the Cupertino store. And people said that they were going to last about 6 months and we'd be out of business, but they lasted a little longer than that. In the late 30s, mid to late 30s, my grandfather got the idea of, instead of buying feed I think he was buying from Albert's in Oakland at the time, that it would be a better deal to actually build a mill and mill his own feed and kind of cut out the middleman, so to speak. So that's what they did.
Tell me, just stop right here. I don't know milling feed. Tell us what's the process.
What
I remember
happens?
the mill.
Right. What did we do there?
Yeah, but what was done there? Yeah, this mill. And matter of fact, I understand the mill is still in existence, or some parts of it.
Some of the pieces of equipment were sold off and went to the Philippines, but I couldn't tell you which ones or where they actually ended up. But that's I remember that happened when we sold off. But what we did was we made pelleted feeds. So there was powdered ingredients that were fed into what was called a pellet mill, which was a big round extrusion machine, and through steam and pressure it would extrude these powders into a hard pellet. So that was part of the process. That made our rabbit pellets, and we had a dog food that we make. Most of our dairy cattle feeds had that in it, had some form of pellet in it. There were also we had a barley roller, so you would take barley and stamp it flat, and oats the same way, corn. That makes it more digestible for the animal when you crack the shell. We did chicken feeds, which were a mixture of whole grains. Basically with those, you would just dump in the grain and mix them all up, and then either sack them or put them in the truck and send them out to the ranch to be fed bulk. But that's what the mill did. It kind of like a flour mill, I guess, if you want to say that. You take one form of grain and make it into another.
Where did the raw products come from? You were talking about orchards and some of the agriculture in this area, but it really wasn't so much grains and the things that you would put in the mill. So that had to come in. I guess.
Most of what our raw product came from the San Joaquin Valley, as years went on, our markets changed, and instead of having large dairy customers here, they moved away to Salinas first, and then on to San Joaquin Valley. So we made double use of our trucks. We would send a truck out to dairies with a finished product, say over to Turlock or somewhere like that, and he would have maybe 5 stops along the way. And these double dairy trucks had compartments in them, so you could have custom feed made per customer, and customer 1 would get compartment number 1, and he'd drive up the road to the next guy, and he'd get compartment 2 and 3, and things like that. So when the trucks were empty, they would always bring something back in to be used as raw material. Load of corn, or a load of oats, or beet pulp out of Spreckles. Trying to think of some of the other stuff, rice bran, things like that. And they all came from over in the valley, or at perhaps at railheads, maybe in Stockton, things like that.
The mill was built here in Cupertino, which is orchard land.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it was because the brothers thought this was where they lived and they wanted to work close to where they lived. But
right.
Why wouldn't that have been built somewhere else outside of Cupertino? Why Cupertino?
Well, as you say, it started, this is where they lived. They had orchard land here that they had acquired both downtown and then up on the home property. The mill developed, as I said, as sort of an offshoot of the truck yard, which was then became the little store that we had. So I don't think it was ever thought of we should move somewhere else. It was just like, we're here and this is successful, so let's go to the next idea, the next bigger and better thing, and see if we can make it better.
So most of us saw the physical mill,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what we associated, but you're saying it really started with the trucking business.
That's correct.
And then a little bit into the retail business, and then the feed and some of that business, and then that caused them to decide maybe we should have a mill
That's
here.
right. Mm-hmm.
I see. What was the major producer there? Was it mainly the trucking business, or was it the mill, or the retail? How did that operate?
It depended on the time of year. During the summer, of course, that's when all of our revenue from the truck hauling came in. In the other times of the year, we had some accounts that we had year-round. We did hauled some case goods for S&W. We had a couple of tankers that hauled petroleum for Union Oil Company. We hauled cardboard for Container Corporation of America. Those were our sort of year-round accounts. And then our big account was with California Canners and Growers, and that was the raw fruit account. So, as I say, in the summertime, that's the one that was the big income producer. But as far as keeping us going year-round, the mill and the retail side were the kind of the bread and butter there.
Tell us how you hauled, what was the process during the summer, the busy time,
Mm-hmm.
hauling for producers to the cannery, and tell us a little bit about how that operated.
Right. Well, we were a contract carrier for California Canners and Growers, so we were basically there for hire guys, and we would start out in the Tracy area, hauling apricots there. That would be probably around the first part of June. And we actually had a fleet of 13 trucks that we sent over there with a dispatcher and whatnot. They would be over here, kind of a mothball fleet in the wintertime, and then they would kind of be mobilized in the summer and go over there. So we had that fleet, plus we would service them also from this side of the hill. So a typical day might be see trucks passing each other on 580, some going over for a load and others coming back over here, because as you remember, there were several canneries around here. There was the one in Sunnyvale. It was the old Shuckle and Company. There was one down on Richmond Chase Cannery on Stockton Avenue. There was a tomato cannery over on Alma Avenue, I believe it was. Those are all Cal-Can. And so your trucks kind of got both utilization, because they had valley plants also. So there were some trucks that we had over there that would stay around there and just haul from the field into the cannery. It depended what crop it was and what cannery was actually processing that crop as to where you got dispatched to.
Where did the trucks spend the night? Were they all here in Cupertino?
All but the 13 or so that were based over there in the valley. So we would start in Tracy with with apricots. Then we would go to Delhi, which is down by Turlock area, for peaches. Then we would finish up with tomatoes, both out of the valley and out of King City. And that would pretty much be our year.
Did you ever drive truck or?
No, just around the yard a little bit. I
Okay.
figured that was probably beyond me.
Tell me how the trucks got to Tracy. There was Pacheco Pass, and there was Altamont Pass.
Yeah.
But there were no real freeways, I would think, in the 50s, early 50s.
The days I remember, let me think. There was 17, which is now 880.
Right.
And then, as I recall, the trucks used to go through what they call Pigeon Pass, through Livermore and Pleasanton, and then work their way out into Tracy that way. As far as the south goes, into Los Banos, Monterey Highway to Highway 152 and over the Pacheco Pass, I mean, that still hasn't changed.
It's not much better today,
No.
right?
And then anything in King City area, 101, of course, was always there. Not in the state it is now, obviously, but yeah. So it was. I remarked today, I'm so happy that we're out of the trucking business, because there's no way that we would be able to make the number of loads that we made per day with the amount of traffic there is, and funneling back into this area.
So you have some empathy for Hanson Permanetti up
Oh my
there,
God,
and all
yes.
those trucks coming out of there and doing the same thing today
Absolutely.
with today's traffic,
Yeah.
and still trying to produce and ship bulk items. So.
On a good day, we used to haul pears from the ice house in Richmond, because what would happen was the pears would come in, they would harvest them up on near Cortland, on what they call the river up there, and they would bring them into the ice house. Some other trucker would do that, sometimes we would do that. And then they'd be stored for a while until they're ready to process them. Then they would dispatch us, and our guy would go up to Richmond. He'd start here, say at 4 o'clock in the morning, go up to Richmond, pick up a load of pears, bring them down to Sunnyvale, and he could make 3 of those a day, going down Highway 880, believe it or not, and still be within his hours and have a comfortable day.
Wow. I see the Libby's can painted down there in Sunnyvale. You referred to that as a different cannery.
Yeah, that's not, there were actually 2 canneries down there. Libby's was a separate entity. They were not part of California Canneries and Growers. Shuckle and Company is where the Home Depot in Sunnyvale is now, if you know where that is. It encompassed a whole area of, on both sides of, what is that, Remington? I forget what street that is.
I don't know.
But anyway, yeah, Shuckle and Company was there.
That's not Remington, I don't think.
No, it'll come to me.
Yeah.
Fair Oaks.
Okay.
Yeah. So that, in fact, where Home Depot is now, used to be the ice house for California Canneries and Growers, plant number 3.
It's right next to, right near the old Westinghouse
In
plant.
fact,
which
yeah,
was-
Westinghouse, CalCan was just this side, would be south of where Westinghouse is.
Go back to the mill and describe that a little bit. Tell us what was out front, what was in the back. What did that? You said it started out as 6 acres. And then,
9 acres.
9 acres.
And then they eventually accumulated, I believe, 26 there between the stores on the side, and then we had 10 acres of apricots in the back, which would be, let's see, where kind of where Rodriguez is now, right behind the Washington Mutual. We had orchard land that was back there behind the Washington Mutual, and that whole area up to where Torrey Avenue comes through.
And that predates of course, the new library, but it predates City Hall being there too, of course, huh?
Yeah, that wasn't our property where City Hall is, but we were directly across Rodriguez from that.
Tell us about the buildings. You say there was a retail operation there.
There was, right. If you remember, there was like a big orange and blue sign painted across the front of the building that said "Our
I
Kelly and
remember
Brother." Right. So the office was there right below that sign in that brick building, and then directly adjacent to it was our retail store. And it was not much. It was probably about 2,000 square feet, maybe, if that.
What was sold in the retail store?
We sold our sack feeds, either 100 pounds, 50 pounds, bales of hay, dog food, cat food, spray materials, orchard supplies, you name it. And then we eventually expanded that into, added on a tack shop with bridles and saddles and things like that, because that seemed to be where the markets were headed. Not too many cows, but a lot of horses around here.
Tell us about Stevens Creek at that time, because the building faced Stevens Creek.
Right. I remember Stevens Creek when it was almost a grade separation. There were the side that was on the south side was a little bit lower than the north side. And I believe it was 2 lanes in each direction at that point.
Wasn't there an old railroad that you at one time went down? Do you recall seeing any of the tracks? I don't mean the
No, that
railroad,
was
but
gone by the time I would remember anything. There's that picture that I think you're familiar with of my dad and his father and the brother with a truck and standing in front of the old building, and you can see the actual Peninsula Railway tracks in there. So I don't know when those were removed. I would say somewhere in the 40s, I think.
For the benefit of our listeners or watchers, do you remember or do you know where that railroad started and where it ended and what was its purpose? I know it predates you.
Yeah, I believe it went from somewhere up in Palo Alto all the way down into downtown San Jose.
And it came down Stevens Creek?
Yes, it did.
Wow.
Phyllis Peck can talk more about that than I can.
Yeah, well, today they want to put it back and call it rapid transit,
Yeah,
I think.
yeah. We didn't know how good we had it, I guess.
Tell me about the environment, the business environment. Was there anyone telling the brothers in the mill that they had to go out of business, or did things just change? I mean,
as far as when we finally decided, they had both passed on by then, the original founders. My great uncle Joe passed away in the late 50s, and my grandfather passed away in 1961. So at that time, the time that we actually had to make the decision, it was my father and his cousin Al who were the owners and operators of the business. And we talked about relocating. We talked about someday we were going to have to do this. And so in fact, they even bought a parcel to possibly relocate the mill over in Milpitas. It was over near where the Ford plant used to be, which is now the Great Mall of Milpitas. They bought, I believe, 10 acres of property over there for a possible relocation someday of the mill. And we looked at that. By the time we finally decided that we would have to relocate if that's what we wanted to do, that had developed so much that it wasn't feasible to do a feed mill there anymore. So then it became, do we want to continue in business and move over to the San Joaquin Valley and either build something or buy something over there?
And what year was this, Ron, when these
when we
changes?
first started thinking about it really seriously, it was probably early 1980s, I'd say 80 to 82, because the actual sale of the property went through in 84. So we weighed all those, those decisions, and it came out that really nobody wanted to make that big of a move and kind of fight all the problems that would be involved in either doing a relocation or buying something and updating it or this or that. So everybody agreed that it probably would be better just to kind of let it go, and we sold off our customer base and actually disassembled the equipment as you talked about earlier.
But there was a market at that time. That was in, you said 80, 82, somewhere around in there.
Yes.
And of course, Cupertino was changing. And
Right.
so it wasn't a bad business decision either, knowing what was going on. Of course, now,
Right.
no telling what you would have there if you still owned the property. But
Well, our trucking business had received kind of the final death knell in 1984 with the bankruptcy of California Canners and Growers. So it's like our major customer that was responsible for 80% of our trucking revenue all of a sudden wasn't there. So we knew that the trucking business, as we were doing it, was not going to work anymore. The feed business was another issue, but again, that would have taken a lot of money to buy something that was modern and up to date. And then it became, do you want to really go into that and try to make more inroads over in the San Joaquin Valley because there was a lot of competition over there for us, or did we just want to, do something else with our lives? And that was sort of the major decision. Was let's do something else with our lives.
looking back on it, are there any of those decisions that were made that you kind of wished had gone a different way? I mean, you have the, a different perspective now,
Sure,
certainly. How would you have liked to have seen things happen?
I was
or
pretty
happen
happy.
differently?
I was pretty happy with the way things turned out. everyone in the family, in the two sides of the family, was able to kind of pick something that they were interested in, whether for themselves or for their kids, and kind of go do that. So, for instance, my dad and I were always more interested in the real estate end of things as things progressed. So we ended up with our shopping center, McClellan Square, and some other investments. My cousin, Al, my dad's cousin, was always interested more in the feed side of things. So he ended up keeping a little retail store we had over in Santa Cruz. And they've since, family has remodeled that and expanded it and doing quite well over there. So I really wouldn't say that there was any bad decisions. I think everybody was pretty happy with the way things ended up. And it allowed people that maybe had different goals in life. As generations continue on, people have different ideas, and it allowed people that had different goals to realize those goals.
Tell me what you're doing today, and where do you spend your time?
Right. My office is in McClellan Square, right at the corner of McClellan and De Anza. I spend it managing our properties that we have. We have that and a few other properties around. So I'm a landlord. I spend the rest of my time doing accounting work all for the family entities and businesses that we've set up. So that keeps me fairly busy.
And tell me about your family.
I'm married for 30 years, coming up to 31 years in November. My wife, Marcia. I have two daughters. One of them, Laura, the older one, is 25, just got married in November. Just passed her teaching credential and is going to start teaching in the fall.
So there will be a teacher in the family.
There will be a teacher. There may be two, yeah, because my younger daughter, Elizabeth, just was accepted to Santa Clara University, and she is also thinks she wants to be a teacher, so we'll see.
Great. Tell me, what's your favorite memory of Cupertino? What would you tell people? You have a statement to make, and this is the time to do it.
I think I remember warm, early, or late summer days, say in September, sitting over in my classroom at St. Joseph's, and the mill used to have something called an airlift that would make this kind of high-pitched hum, and you could hear it virtually all over the city. In fact, sometimes if it was quiet enough, and believe it was quiet enough, you could hear it all the way up at our house in Bubb Road, which was 3 miles away. And not that it was that loud, it was just kind of a pleasant background hum. And it's something that I don't know if anybody else here ever, in town ever remembers it, but it's something that kind of evokes the memory of a nice warm, late summer day and just kind of a peaceful tranquility. That I remember, and you could actually hear the noontime chimes from St. Joseph's Church all the way up to Bubb Road at that time, if the conditions were right.
Perfect.
Because it was just a quiet little enclave of the valley at that time.
Tell me your thoughts about Cupertino today and what you see, and you spend a good deal of every day here in
Sure.
Cupertino. What are your thoughts? What do you think about?
Well, it's always changing, I think. I think the city is being run well. I think the city fathers are doing a good job in trying to balance quality of life with the inevitability of growth that happens as people, want to continue living here. People come here for the climate, for the business environment, for the wonderful schools, and I mean, as you indicated earlier, that in 1968 that was the case, and it certainly hasn't changed. So I think Cupertino's a vibrant place, and probably one of the most vibrant places of the Santa Clara Valley for a small town. We're pretty big.
Going back, you mentioned that there was kind of the west side and the intersection of Stevens Creek and Highway 9 at the time was kind of the downtown.
That was it.
There's been always some question about why Cupertino didn't have a downtown. Why doesn't Cupertino look like some of the neighboring cities?
Right.
Can you give me your thoughts on that?
Oh boy, that's a good question. We didn't have the little old Main Street shops like that, say, Saratoga had and Los Gatos had, and I don't really know the answer as to why that was. Perhaps merchants weren't interested in locating here at that time, because I remember before my grandfather built the shops along Highway 9 there wasn't really much in town at all, as far as if you wanted to go to a bakery shop or clothing store or something like that, you either had to go to Sunnyvale or Saratoga or down into San Jose. And I think people just did that. I think probably at the time there wasn't enough population out here to warrant having multiple shops like that. Cupertino store, which we see here on the wall, was the first and only mercantile here until we built those other little shops.
Also, it would seem to me that we developed the city on its major traffic routes on Stevens Creek and Highway 9
Right.
were virtually busy streets,
Exactly.
busy small roads, and then became larger roads. And so the shops developed along those areas,
Right.
which wasn't conducive to a little downtown
That's
kind
right.
of an area.
And I think people were always coming through there on their way to somewhere else. Cupertino was never a destination. People always used to say about, oh yeah, I remember going through there when I was a kid on my way to Sunnyvale, or yeah, on my way, going up to Los Gatos. I remember going through Cupertino. So I think that's probably it.
Do you think in the future Cupertino will be remembered more for Apple Computer or Cali Mill?
Well, Cali Mill was not a international successful business, but it's nice to know that there's going to be a park named after the structure that will keep it in people's minds, and I'm sure 25 years from now people are going to go, what in the devil was Cali Mill? But I think Apple has put Cupertino on the international map and probably will remain so. And I think some of the old timers, hopefully they'll pass the remembrances on to their kids and grandkids of what used to be here.
Tell us about the Cali Mill Plaza that you just talked about. It's going to be dedicated coming up this Saturday,
This
I
Saturday,
think.
that's correct.
And that would be what date? Do you remember?
That is June 24th from 10 till 1:30. There's going to be there's going to be a dedication ceremony and some festivities and fun after that.
Great. Is there any historical part of that Cali Mill Plaza? Is there any remnants from the mill or any photos, pictures?
There are going to be, I don't think they're up yet, but the city has been working with me with some pictures and things, and they're going to put some I believe, under the covered seating area. There's going to be a couple of pictures and some signs and plaques and things like that.
Great. Well, we'll all look forward to that.
Okay.
Ron, tell us a little bit about businesses and what you recall the old Cupertino businesses that you remember.
Sure. Well, of course, there was the venerable Cupertino store, which by the time I was old enough to remember it, had become a red and white little grocery store.
And where was that?
That's at very near the corner of De Anza and Stevens Creek, where the USA gas station and car wash is now, and I believe it may have even gone a little bit east of that, but it was very close to the corner there. And then behind that was Charlie Bear's old blacksmith shop. I remember as kids we used to use what was then the vacant field where Comerica Bank is today. That used to be a vacant field that we would play on. We'd have our baseball games there. And you could go over a little hill in the back of that field towards the De Anza Boulevard side and kind of spy into Charlie Bear's old blacksmith shop back there, which we were never allowed to do. But some kids did anyway. I wouldn't say I was one of them. But.
Was it still a blacksmith shop?
No,
or
it was.
By then it was auto repair or something?
Well,
or
actually,
what
it was the remnants of the blacksmith shop that was actually behind his house, because his house used to sit there on the front of Stevens Creek Boulevard. And he had the blacksmith shop, as I recall, in the back, or the remnants of it anyway. Then there was the Cupertino Lumber Yard that was down near where the old fire station was, if you recall where the old Cupertino fire station was. That was right, I believe, next door to it, which is pretty smart to put the fire station by the lumber yard. So there was that. I remember the bank very well. All these people that ran the businesses were friends together here in town. Neil Thornley was the name of the man that owned the lumber yard. The bank was, president of the bank was Walter Field. And they had a cute, kind of a fun thing that they used to do at the old drugstore. I mentioned that the drugstore was in that group of shops, sort of near where Armadillo Willie's is today. And at 10 o'clock every morning, a lot of the businessmen would meet there. It was the typical old drugstore with the round seats and the counter, and they would have their coffee there in the morning. And my grandfather would go over along with my dad. You'd have Phil Kuiper from the grocery store. You'd have Don Banley, the realtor, Neil Thornley, the lumberyard guy, several other business people in town. And they had kind of had a coffee clutch and solved all the world's problems there.
Was there a Chamber of Commerce then? I guess the Chamber of Commerce was founded in 1955, the same year the city was. But
right.
Before that, it sounded like the businessmen got together and kind of worked together.
Informal Chamber of Commerce, yeah, exactly. Everybody was very friendly to each other. It was there wasn't a lot of competition. There was one clothing store and one lumberyard and one banker, so everybody kind of had their own little area of specialty.
Tell me about what we refer to as Old Monte Vista. What do you remember down in that area, which is now the new post office and some other things?
Well, where the post office now stands, that was the Raffretti property, and Paul Quinterno owned a Shell station that was right there. And then next to that was the Monte Vista hardware store, and then right next to that was Raffretti's Market. And that's where we did all of our grocery shopping. Chief Quinterno and Charlie Raffretti were partners, and conducted business there for years. Behind that was the Monte Vista, what do they call it? It was basically rockery. They sold, rocks and dirt and gravel and things like that.
I remember that. It backs onto the railroad tracks.
Exactly, yeah.
But when you went into Raffretti's and you wanted to buy meat, where'd you go?
Oh, you went to Johnny Botano's butcher counter, yeah. John had the, I guess, I don't know if it was a concession or exactly how they worked it, but it was his butcher shop, definitely. He ran the show there. And he and Bert Gilson were the two butchers that worked back there.
What else was there in Monte Vista at the time? Was Blackberry Farm there?
Blackberry Farm was there.
Golf course was there, or was it?
No, well, in the old days.
The picnic area, what was there?
The picnic area was there, and the swimming pool. They had that, and I remember we used to have Lions Club barbecues there. The golf course didn't come till quite a bit later. Across the street from Raffretti's Market is where, let's see, what was there? They had a little variety store there. That building is still existing, in fact. They just did a big remodel on it. The Monte Vista Pharmacy was over there, and some other little, I can't recall now. I think there was a bike shop there at one time, things like that. That's kind of what and the Wolfer Brothers Cannery. That was down on, I believe, Imperial.
Right.
Yeah, I remember that.
And what did they can there? What was on him? That's now a home development or a new condos and development.
I think they did a little bit of everything. I seem to remember them doing tomatoes, but a lot of the canneries would just switch over products as the crops came in. So you didn't necessarily have to limit yourself to one product.
So on Imperial Avenue was Wolfer Brothers Cannery.
Correct.
And you recall that was operating through the 50s and early 60s?
Yeah, I think they probably were operating even into the late 60s and 70s.
Wow, and then the Measurex and that whole area started. Was the cannery still going when the West Valley Industrial Park on Bubb Road was?
I believe it was still there. Whether or not, as I recall, it sat there for a while, kind of fallow and in disrepair. But I know that the two were there because I was driving at that point. I remember driving by them and kind of noting, this is weird.
And of course, there was no Highway 85 at the time.
No,
it was
absolutely.
That was only an area that was designated soon or sometime to be a road. I remember in the 50s and 60s, and it didn't get built until I guess the 70s and 80s or something. Yeah,
mid 80s.
So there was no big dividing line between west and east, and we didn't have that freeway coming right through the middle of Cupertino.
Just the swath of land that was reserved for it, as you say, and yeah.
Tell us about De Anza College and that area, as you recall.
I remember that as Orchard, and it was called the Euphrat Estate as I was growing up, and I don't know too much about the people that had it. I just remember coming down McClellan and then turning left onto Stelling, and that being all orchard in there. I think there was a pump house back in there too, as I recall, almost across from Pepper Tree today, where one of the main entrances of De Anza is. There was a road that led up to a pump house there, as I recall.
What kind of orchard? What kind of?
I think it was prunes, but I can't be 100% sure. that was,
So that the whole area encompassed by De Anza was a Euphrat ranch or a homestead or
we
what?
called it the Euphrat Estate. That's what it was
Estate.
always referred to. And I don't know who the people were. I never knew them or met them, but that's what we knew it as.
Do you recall what year De Anza College was built? Must have been about
The early 60s, I want to say.
66, 67,
Yeah,
68,
because I remember,
I think.
I
about
remember
that.
driving, and I didn't drive until 66, so I'd say about 68.
Okay.
I remember driving past there and having it still be orchard.
Okay, if you come down Stelling and you turn right on Stevens Creek,
Mhm.
now you go by Marie Callender's and a
Right.
Mervyn's and a shopping center there. What do you recall when you were growing up?
Well, backing up just a little bit, as you make that right-hand turn from Stelling onto Stevens Creek, on the corner there where there's a little multi-unit center now with a Starbucks, et cetera, right across from De Anza, that was the J.D. Williams property. That was one of the last E.J. Parrish houses that was left here. And the Williams sisters, Alice, Jane, and Helen, were my music teachers. And I started taking piano from them when I was about 8 years old. And they had a piano studio down in San Jose near Bellarmine College Prep. There's an old house down there that they had set up as a studio. And then as things changed with them, they got a little bit older and their mother became infirm. They decided to give up their studio down there and just take a few students and teach them out of their home. So I remember going there as a kid, and it was a neat old house, big old grandfather clock. It was just gorgeous.
What happened to the house? Did it burn down and get
No,
moved? Or?
they Mrs. Williams passed away, and the two sisters were neither one of them ever married, and they became a little bit old to teach piano anymore. So that was basically their legacy, that property. So they ended up selling that property to, I believe it was Mobil Oil Company, because they put a Mobil gas station there. And unfortunately, the house went the way of all old houses. But they needed the nest egg there for themselves to live.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember the Parrish house where over there at Memorial Park?
I don't
there
remember.
There is a remnant
right.
of it today.
I don't remember the particular Parrish house, but it was, from the pictures I've seen of it, it was pretty much the same in look to the Williams house. And that one, as I say, I remember very well.
Didn't they use parts of the old Parrish house to build the gazebo in Memorial Park?
I think they may have
some
yeah.
of that. Let me conclude with a little story of. Can you tell us what this is in a little history of this Christmas tree? I understand.
Right. This is a creation put together by Ernie Amaral, who was probably one of the most unique men I've ever met in my life. He worked for my grandfather and my father from the time he was about 13 years old until he retired. He was one of our original truck drivers and original employees. And didn't have a lot of formal education, but the guy could figure out how to do anything. And this is something that he came up with to put on top of the Christmas tree that used to sit on top of the mill. And this was the star, I think. So it's as somebody indicated, kind of fraying and doesn't look too safe, but I think it got the job done.
Well, I think today that's a piece of the memorabilia that's located at the Cupertino Historical Society.
Right.
And they will always have that to remember the Cali and Brothers Mill on Stevens Creek. And could you give us a kind of a concluding thought as to when you think back on that family home there, or not home, but the family business,
Mm-hmm.
being at that section of Cupertino and that area? Tell me about it today and your thoughts.
Well, Cupertino is, as we said earlier, always wanted a downtown, and it doesn't seem that retail was ever going to be the formation of that downtown. I think the many uses that are on that property now are providing Cupertino with a focal point, be it from the park to the hotel to the restaurant and the offices and the living, the apartments and things like that. So it's definitely different than anything I grew up with, but than what around here isn't. I think as I said earlier, Cupertino remains vibrant because it's not afraid to grow and change with the times, and sometimes become a cutting-edge player in that change of the times. I think that's what I see going on there on the property today, trying to eliminate a lot of cars, make it a pedestrian-friendly area, have people live and work hopefully in the same development or complex. You have Borland there now in the towers that hopefully will bring people in to utilize the hotel and the restaurants and things like that. So I think it's the very vibrant heart of Cupertino, and will keep it a thriving city.
And give us a place where we can say there used to be a Cali mill down
That's
there.
right. Yeah, we'll take care of that on Saturday, I think.
Great. With that, we'd like to wrap it up and say thanks for joining us.